All right, this video is for green architecture. We are moving into lesson 2, where we start talking about the green part of green architecture. To get started, we're going to look at a PowerPoint for building green and what the whole building green thing really means. So that's where our goal is today. So green building, what is it? And we'll kind of work through this PowerPoint just to get your mind thinking about this a little bit. Well, green building, what is it? Is it a relationship? Is it a process of design and construction, conservation of energy, conservation of natural resources? It promotes a daily, healthy environment. It's not a scorecard. In other words, if you don't do this, this, and this, it's not, you get so many points for doing different things. It's not a scorecard. It's land use and site planning. It is material selection. It is being energy efficient. It is utilizing indoor air quality. Not a scorecard for all of those things, but it is all of those elements and then some. All right, so let's dig into this a little bit further, and this will help us as we go into your activity, which is called Building Green. So, where did this whole green idea start? Well, it's really nothing new. If you start thinking back to it, building with straw, building with some of the renewable materials that we have around us, building with the earth. Think back to some of the earlier people. How did they build? The native people to our land. How did they build their structures, their homes? Okay. Well, let's look at something simple. Think of the story of the three pigs, right? They built with straws. They did a straw house. Straw is very renewable, isn't it? It continues to grow year after year after year. Think of how we might build a house out of straw. It could be as simple as this, stacking up straw bales around a house and then putting an outer protective coating around that. Think of building with the earth, some of the adobe structures that maybe were utilized by the natives to the southwest part of the United States. So we think of adobe type mud buildings, mud huts, if you will. It's gone even to a more modern time where we, again, think about the southwest part of the United States. If you've ever visited or seen pictures of areas in Arizona, for example, New Mexico, maybe even Texas, you see some structures like this. And what are they? They're kind of a modern version of a modern adobe building. Where did it all start? Well, what we know of as our current model for green building really got a kickstart in 1992. And I realize that's before you guys were around, but that's easily within my lifetime. That's after I graduated from high school. So it's not really a brand new thing. It's been around for a while. In the year 2000, there was an organization that was established called LEED, and LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. And we'll talk just briefly about that as we go along. In 2007, there was an increased demand for green building. I think what happened is some of our governmental leaders started realizing that, hey, we're having shortages of power and energy. What can we do to be more efficient to maintain the power and energy for the next generation? So there became an increased demand. We started doing things differently to try and maintain some of the resources that we have. Future of this whole thing is kind of sometimes referred to this as a self-fulfilling prophecy. What's going to happen going forward? You know, we don't want to run out of things, so we want to think of our future and how can we make things better for the next generation. So there's an organization called the U.S. Green Building Corporation. It's basically our lead, and that's the symbol that they use if something has attained LEED certification. Some of the myths and maybe the misunderstandings, some of the negative connotation that surrounds the whole green building thing. Number one, green building is for, quote, tree huggers, people that really want to protect the environment at all costs. They're the only ones can do that. Well, that's not the case. Okay. Number two, green building is too expensive. Well, initially it probably was a little more expensive, but what happened is if you build green, our idea is we're going to save energy in the long run. So initially it might be more expensive, but you're going to save the money in your energy efficiency if energy efficiency in the life of the structure that you're building. Even with now, since 2007, when things started, the cost of some of these building materials has gotten less and less because we're learning how to produce them more efficiently. Number three, green building is ugly. Um, Initially, I think that might have been the case, but I think we've realized there are ways we can make this so they don't have to have a unsightly look to them. Number four, green building doesn't work. Some people just say, "Oh, it just plain doesn't work. I'm not going to do it." Well, I think history has proven wrong that green building does work. It does save energy, does save our environment and our resources. Moving along, think of some of the things. Do they have to be a ugly little box like that? No, we can use green building techniques and make a very beautiful home to live in. Okay. Some of the categories, and this is where our activity is going to go into today, a green building categories. The first one is that of site planning and design. Before we can build a house, we have to get a plot of land or get a lot and figure out how are we going to place the house on that lot? How can we plan for that? Can we make use of some of the existing things that are there? Trees, water. Trees, of course, give us shade, wind block, things like that. We might consider exterior structures, the building itself. We might consider the mechanical systems, what heats and cools and gives power to the system that makes it comfortable to live in. And interior finishes, the inside, what makes that comfortable, what makes that so we can breathe the inside air without being having it cause harm to our bodies. So those are some thoughts that we're going to consider a little bit here. So some ideas first, site planning and location. I'm sorry, site planning and design. And what's going to happen in your assignment? You are each going to be assigned one of these categories, whether it be site planning and design, exterior structure, the interior finishes, or the mechanical systems. So pay attention here because you're going to use this. It kind of primes your idea for what we're going to do. So site planning is the location. Use of nature. I mentioned that a little bit already. If we have a lot of trees there, are we automatically going to come in and cut down all those trees? If we have piles of dirt, are we going to automatically level it out so it's perfectly flat and level, no trees? No, we probably don't want to do that. If we make use of what's already there, trees can serve several purposes. They can provide shade. They can provide a wind block for those windy days. I think especially the windy, cold winter days that no doubt are ahead of us. Can we utilize what's there without tearing it down? Think of a solar orientation. Where does the sun rise? Well, the sun rises in the south. And as hot as that may be in the summertime, that feels mighty good in the wintertime. So maybe we want to have solar orientation such that the windows, we have a lot of windows on that south side for those cold winter days. We're getting as much solar, that's sunlight and warmth coming in through the window. So we might plan our house according to where the sun rises and sets. And conversely, if we have a lot of windows to the south, that's a good thing. But to the north, of course, the sun doesn't get on the north side very well in the northern hemisphere where we live. So maybe that's a good place to not have as many big windows, so you don't have to worry about the wind blowing through a window crack in the opening and things like that. Landscaping. We might make use of some of the existing landscaping. Sometimes people buy a lot or a plot of land that is beautifully landscaped already. Maybe there's a creek flowing through that. Maybe there's some wooded areas that we want for wildlife. Maybe a scenic view. You might place your house in such a way that you can see the beauty of the natural landscaping. The interior design that very well may take into effect what when we plan this thing according to our site planning orientation, all these things. Maybe you want to put your bedrooms to the north side so you don't have to have as many or as big a windows. Put your family room, your living room where you have big windows. Maybe put that on the south side, and that's where you want to see your nice scenic views and so on. So some things to think about for site planning and design. Next one we're going to talk about is exterior structure. Some of you will respond to some questions regarding exterior structure. That might consider things like the foundation. In other words, the part of your house that's buried in the ground. When we build a house, we dig a hole and we lay a foundation. Typically in our area, foundations are made with concrete blocks, but that's that structure that goes in the ground. When I was in college, I remember the big push was to use lumber for that. Lumber being a lot more renewable, if you will. Trees will grow back and a little more energy efficient in some cases. So we might consider that. Concrete blocks being common. Concrete slab is part of that. Do we have a full basement or is it partially above ground? We might consider the framing of our house. How are we going to make the framing that we could make this more green, if you will? Okay. What can we do with our framing? What can we do with our roofs and our attics? All of these things go into our exterior structure, our siding and our decking. Those are all the exterior. In other words, these are all elements that consider the outside of our house. We're not talking inside rooms, just the outside of our house. Okay? So we think about here, we can kind of see an image of the foundation, which is down in the ground. Here's our ground level. Framing, how we're going to frame up our walls, inside and outside. Basically, we're talking exterior walls, so the outside walls. We might consider what kind of roofing are we going to put on to make it so it's resistant to the weather and the storms and the sun and all those types of exterior weather elements. And then we're going to add a deck on, maybe where a deck might kind of orient itself such a way that we have a scenic area, privacy, things like that. What can we do to make all of these elements more green in our construction ideas? Mechanical systems is our third segment. Mechanical systems. That might consist of plumbing, okay? That gets the water for drinking, for cleaning, things like that. Our heating, our ventilation, our air conditioning, oftentimes referred to as HVAC. If you ever hear that term thrown around the building world, HVAC is just heating, ventilation, and air conditioning. Electrical. Of course, we want to have electricity come into our houses, so we have light and a lot of our electrical components that we use, appliances, TVs, phone chargers, radios, things like that. So we think of all of these things in our mechanical systems. And our fourth category is interior finishes. Interior finishes, we're going to think about insulation because we want it to stay warm inside of our house. With the cold winter coming, we want to have insulation so the cold stays outside, the warm stays inside. And on the other side of that coin, when we're thinking of entering into summer next spring, we want to keep the hot of summer heat outside and keep the cool inside. So insulation helps with keeping it warm, keeping it cool. It also helps reduce the amount of noise. Windows and doors. What kind of windows and doors might we add into a house to make it more energy efficient, to make it more green? There are different types of windows, and we'll talk about that later as we move along, but different types of doors and windows that make it more energy efficient. Air quality is an important part of our interior finishes. So do we have some sort of a system in there that exchanges the air, sometimes called an air exchanger system, that makes it so the air is easier to breathe? Or do we just continue to use the same recycled air over and over? And if we do, what are we doing to filter that so we get the germs and the dust and things out of the air so it's easier to breathe? Sometimes bad air causes sicknesses. What materials might we use in there? So some of those materials might consist of, we look at the insulation image up here, but materials, can we find some recyclable materials for finishing, whether it be countertops or door and window trim, whatever that might be? There are more and more recycled materials out there. I just refinished a room about a year ago, and all the trim around my windows, I was able to find recycled window trim. And makes a difference. I can save our environment that way by using some things that have been recycled and reused. So we think of all of these types of things, the insulation that goes into our attics and our walls and things like that, the types of doors and windows, sometimes even the window coverings that help keep some of that cold out. Hopefully we don't have to wear a gas mask in our homes. I mean, we're all wearing the face mask right now to keep the germs out of our lungs and out of our system. But hopefully, the air quality is such that we don't have to wear a gas mask per se to make it breathable as we're living in our own homes. The paints that we use, sometimes paints put off some bad fumes. So, what kind of paints might we use so that we can easily breathe while we're in there? What type of flooring? We've talked about flooring a little bit, and we talked about the sustainability. I think of vinyl flooring versus putting hardwood flooring in. Think of cork, bamboo, ceramic, all these different types of floors. Which ones are going to be more kind to our environment? So a lot of things to think about when we're working through um, all of our resources for making a green home. So gives you an insight, a little bit of an overview into where we're going here. I'm just going to get back to our home view here if I can. And now we'll apply some of this to the activity that we're working on where we're starting to think about building green. All right. Hopefully, you've got a little insight there, and now we'll get to apply that to an activity. See you soon, guys.